This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, the real story of Anthony Fauci. With us this evening, Peter Barry Chowka, an investigative reporter and a contributing writer for The American Thinker. Peter, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Jamie. It's great to be with you.
Great to have you here. So look, you began reporting on the role of Dr. Fauci in the government's war on AIDS beginning in the mid-1980s. Why don't we start with that? Because you know a lot about this individual. Give us the background on him and what you found in the 80s.
Well, as a brief introduction, of course, Dr. Anthony Fauci is now best known for as the face of the government's COVID-19 response. And he turned 80 years old last month, and he's still at it. He's worked for the government virtually his entire life. And in fact, it was reported last week that Dr. Fauci is the highest paid employee of the millions who work for the federal government. He makes more than his boss, the President of the United States. So that signifies the kind of power that he wields. But he's had a lot of power for a long time. In addition to what we know of him from the last year in COVID-19, his career with the government goes back to the 1970s. But in the early 80s, he took over the National Institutes of Virology and allergies and infectious diseases, I should say. He's a virologist by training. And this was timed perfectly for the onset of HIV/AIDS. And he jumped on that big time. And of course, AIDS is a subject in itself that you could spend hours deconstructing. But in a nutshell, Dr. Fauci and his colleagues at the National Institutes of Health, and actually around the world, because he is a globalist, they rode the AIDS wave. And after 4 decades, this is a statistic that I think I published for the first time anywhere last March 21st at American Thinker in my first article about Dr. Fauci and COVID. In 4 decades, AIDS has reportedly killed about 500,000 or 600,000 Americans. Meanwhile, cancer during that period has killed about 60 times as many Americans, around 30 million, and heart disease even more. But despite this kind of data, a word that Dr. Fauci and his ilk love, Fauci managed to put AIDS front and center and make it the second most funded disease in terms of federal research for the past 40 years. And even though the cause of AIDS was known from day one, unsafe sex and sharing syringes during the injection of illegal drugs, that's the cause of AIDS. Now, here's how this is relevant to today, Jamie, and our response to COVID-19, including lockdowns, vaccines, mandatory testing, and the prospect for immunity passports in the future. Well, in the early days of this 21st century, about 15 or 16 years ago, the AIDS war was still going strong. That is the government-funded AIDS war, which has totaled about $600 billion in the last 40 years. Actually, the AIDS war is still going on even today. And the poobahs of AIDS a decade and a half ago were demanding that everyone on the planet be tested for HIV, the virus that supposedly causes AIDS, because there was no vaccine for AIDS despite billions of dollars being spent. And it was recommended that people who tested at risk for AIDS be given powerful, expensive drugs to pre-treat the patient in case he got AIDS. So it seems to me that that's almost an exact blueprint for the war that's being fought now against COVID-19. There's nothing new under the sun.
Exactly, and you can't question any of this. I remember years back, I was reading something, it was like, HIV does not cause AIDS. And I was like, what does this mean? And I started looking into it, I started researching it, and it's just incredible. This is for another show, of course, but the evidence is not confirmed in these things. And there's a lot of questions here. There's so many doctors and medical experts that question the orthodoxy on this. And, but if you get the positive test for this, then you have to get drugs for this. You're not allowed to question anything. But, I've read and followed, Peter Duesberg and a whole bunch of people that question the orthodoxy here. But what's interesting in all of this is lots of money involved, and anybody that even dares to question the party line is immediately branded just a lunatic, and their careers are ruined, right?
Well, you mentioned Dr. Duesberg. He, in the 1980s, was one of the leading, most published scientists in the world. When he wrote one article challenging the HIV/AIDS hypothesis, his career went downhill. He never got another research grant. He was basically made a non-person. And by the way, in the 1990s, I spent several years with some colleagues working on a documentary that we hope to produce called Silent Dissent on this very topic. The number of dissenting scientists around the world who did not buy into this HIV/AIDS hypothesis as it was being sold. And we had a production agreement with a PBS station in Rochester, New York, but it did not come to pass, obviously, on PBS. It was too hot for them. But I got very, very deeply into that story. And Jamie, it paralleled a lot of what I found out when I was reporting on the cancer war, which began 50 years ago, this coming December. It was supposed to cure cancer in time for the bicentennial. Well, that came and went. We still haven't cured cancer. And by the way, President Biden announced recently that he's going to ratchet up the cancer war again at the National Institutes of Health. And he's promising a cure for cancer in the near future. So it's the boondoggle that keeps on giving, apparently.
Yeah, and I remember just that scare of just hundreds of thousands and millions of heterosexuals are going to be dying and everything. And they really, they orchestrated and choreographed this scare, this fear, and then, of course, the meds for all of this. And it mirrors something going on today, doesn't it? And Fauci's involved.
Absolutely. If you go back and look at the literature from the 1980s, 90s, early 2000s vis-a-vis HIV/AIDS, and you change a few words around, substituting COVID-19 for AIDS, you have almost exactly the same parallel story. They've got the playbook, and this time they've hit pay dirt with it because they've learned how to really strike fear into everyone. And look how our lives have changed in the last year. You can't even recognize the country or the world we're living in anymore, thanks to COVID-19 and what they have done with it.
Well, one mask is not enough. You've got to wear 3 now. At the risk of just raising something slightly inappropriate, but it's in the news. In China now, I don't know if of course you're following it. They're going to have anal swabbing now for the COVID. Have you heard this?
Yes.
And Peter, I was thinking of that, and I was thinking, okay, because it just gets more and more bizarre as we go forward. But I was thinking, because I just think of the deep state and all those evil people and everything they're up to. And I'm thinking, okay, what are they doing now? It's not enough just to put the mask on and everything that they're doing. So now they're starting this interesting thing here, if that's a word used to describe it. How necessary is it to do that? But I was really thinking, Peter, it's this ongoing thing of humiliating people, debasing people, making them invading our privacy, and also how many people are not going to go for this kind of exam. And so that way people hide, people stay home, people won't be able to get on a plane. It's really perverse and diabolical, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it will easily allow the separation of those who will and those who will not go along with this madness, in my opinion. And, it's not even which orifice is tested for COVID-19. There are numerous scientists, doctors, clinicians, researchers, epidemiologists who point out that mass testing is not associated with solving the COVID-19 problem, nor are the lockdowns and the other things that we are now suffering under. And, it remains to be seen if the vaccines will bring it under control. But of course, now we have the introduction of these new alleged worse variants of COVID-19 from South Africa or England, which may or may not be susceptible to being controlled by the vaccine. So God knows where this is going, Jamie. It's
Yeah.
in my 57 years of reporting on national politics and the politics of healthcare and other subjects, I have never been so frustrated and fearful of the future that we face right now. It's absolutely
Yeah.
mind-boggling, the situation
Yeah.
we're in, thanks to all of
Yeah.
this.
Absolutely. And they definitely had to get rid of Trump to make this all work. So look, in your work, you've done amazing work, Peter. You've shown, number one, that that Fauci is very much, I guess maybe you use the word as well, but we can call Fauci a Hillary Clinton stooge. And so he's part of this whole deep state thing and adores Hillary Clinton, etc. And just the way that he was always rolling his eyes and smirking kind of with a little bit of disdain during Trump's press conferences. What do you make of all of that?
Well, subtly at first, but consistently throughout last year, Fauci was constantly undercutting his boss, President Trump. The Daily Mail reported in an article last March 20th, early on, that Fauci, at one of the press conferences of the White House task force on COVID-19, was rolling his eyes as President Trump was speaking. So he made it clear. But later in the year, in the fall, Fauci shared the stage virtually with Hillary Clinton, who he expressed his love for in 2013, literally his love for Hillary Clinton, at this left-wing conference put on by the Atlantic magazine, which is one of President Trump's greatest enemies. In a couple of days before the election, Fauci gave interviews to the Washington Post and 60 Minutes in which he dissed President Trump. So in my opinion, if you had to single out one person among the many who had it in for President Trump, but is singularly most responsible for his takedown, I would put that on Anthony Fauci. He was one of the most popular people in the world, and certainly in the United States last year. He was a finalist in Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Everybody loved him, including many on the conservative right initially. He could do no wrong. And he used his political skills honed over 40 years to target and to take down President Trump. And I
Yeah.
think that is unforgivable, in my opinion.
Absolutely. You know, Peter, just also with our own judgment, you know, I'll just say, like, when I look at Trump and I see him talking, and, you know, I just really like him. You know, he's funny, good man, but you can see an honest person with integrity who loves the country, etc. My opinion. When I look at Fauci, okay, fantastic, we're in agreement. When you look at Fauci, it's almost like watching some kind of horror movie. Something is not right about this guy. You can even tell with his appearance, with his aura, his disposition, with the look on his face.
Well, exactly. I mean, body language and facial expressions mean a lot. And, you know, I have nothing against Dr. Fauci personally. I wish him all the best. I wish him a long life. In fact, the 5 initial articles I wrote about him last spring at American Thinker resulted in a lot of blowback and more than 15 minutes of infamy for me. I was attacked 4 times in the Washington Post by name, by links, twice in the New York Times, including a page 1 article and many other MSM. And there was a point where it was said that because of articles like mine, allegedly, Dr. Fauci had to have protection from Federal Protective Services because of threats to his life. So I mean, in no way are my articles responsible for that. I go by the facts. I do not call people names. And the stooge headline was put on it, although I do agree with that. And, you know, that's an appropriate term. Steve Hilton used it to describe a Joe Biden. So when I heard that, I said, you know, I think it applies to Dr. Fauci as well. But,
Yeah,
you know, I'm a peaceful person, Jamie. I am a nonviolent person, and my articles are not inflammatory. So I reject any allegation that I had anything to do with, riling up threats against Dr. Fauci. And of course, today we see this same meme being used against conservatives, MAGA people, Republicans, and we're being blamed for this sedition, which is a complete figment of the left's and the media's imagination. I mean, it just is unbelievable.
It's also incredible that we even have to say this, but, because obviously, just for the sake of the KGB persecution, we are not trying to instigate any violence against this man. Obviously, we're for peace, and we're just stating our opinion, but of just his policies and what he's up to. But, I was even thinking, Peter, the climate we're in now, I was thinking just even doing this show and just, my family's from the Soviet Union. We thought we escaped the KGB and the Soviet Union, but I feel like that's how we're living now. Because I'm thinking, okay, they've already demonetized our channel. They've done lots of other things with our channel that I'm not going to get too much into here on YouTube. But I don't know how long we're going to last here because we're not into just following the party line. But I was even thinking, we might criticize Anthony Fauci. Yeah, they'll probably take that show down, and who knows what they'll do. You're just not allowed to say anything anymore, and we're in America.
And don't you also feel, Jamie, that we, journalists, analysts, have to now self-censor at every turn?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been careful throughout my career in trying to stick with the facts, let the facts drive the story. But now that's not even enough. You have to be so careful that you don't say something that will offend a bot or an algorithm in the cloud somewhere that's manipulating against us because we are not, preaching to the left-wing choir here. And it's truly frightening. I mean, there's so many things. On a personal note, I'm having trouble sleeping now that President Trump is no longer our president because I've been here before and it's not pleasant.
Yeah, it's something very dark has set in, and the Bolsheviks are here. The spirit of the Soviet regime is here, and let's end on
Jamie, because I'm very familiar with your career, and like many people who came to this country and excelled here because of the freedom coming from a hardcore communist state, in your case, the Soviet Union, you can really speak truth to power like few can at this point.
Well, thank you, Peter. Yeah, we, our family, we know, if I can use an expression, the smell of the virus, and that killed millions of our people, and we definitely can smell and detect and see that it's here. So let's end on Fauci here. Surprise, surprise, he's become the top dog in the Biden administration's COVID-19 policy. So let's end with that. Now he was with Trump, now he's with Biden, and there's been some reports that he's so relieved now that he's with the right people now doing the right things, right?
Exactly. Well, he's been giving a bunch of interviews, including this week, and he was on Fox News twice this week in kind of softball interviews. And I read the transcripts, and I shouldn't be shocked at this, but he is very well practiced at the political art of systematic ambiguity. He talks, but he says virtually nothing that's coherent or to the point or actually answering the question. So yeah, he's here. He's the number one top dog in President Biden's COVID-19 panel and plan. And all we can do is try to hold on for dear life in the next 2 years and hope we can survive the onslaught of these people who, in my opinion, do not have the best interests of America at heart.
Yeah, to say the least, to say the least. Peter Chowka, thank you so much for all your work, for all your truth-telling and your courage and nobility. Wishing you the best. Thanks for joining the Glazov Gang.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining the Glazov Gang this evening. We'll see you soon. Good night.